Thank you for joining our webinar, That's Mental with Amanda Rosenberg. I would like to remind you all that if there's time, we'll be doing a Q&A at the end of the presentation. So if you're joining through Zoom, you can just type your question into the Q&A chat box. And if you're joining us on Facebook Live, you can just leave a comment. I'm excited to introduce our presenter today, Amanda Rosenberg. Amanda Rosenberg is a San Francisco-based writer whose work has been featured in the New York Times, Vox, Salon, McSweeney's, The Hairpin, and Funny or Die. She is currently a staff writer on a Netflix young adult series, and Amanda's first book, That's Mental, was published by Turner Publishing in 2019. We are so honored and excited to have Amanda joining us today for this webinar to read a little bit about her book and share a little bit about herself with us. So without further ado, thank you, Amanda, for joining us. You're welcome to get started whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much, Natalie. I'm very excited to be here. I feel very honored to have been asked to do this. I just want to preface my presentation with, I'm not an expert at this. I will never give advice, really. I know that mental illness is complex and it's deeply personal. And having bipolar 2, by the way, that's what I have, is different for everyone, and everyone experiences it differently. So this whole presentation and everything is based off my personal experience. And if it doesn't match yours, then yeah, of course it wouldn't, because we all experience it differently. So this is by no means like a guidebook or anything like that. This is just my personal experience with having bipolar 2, coming to terms with having bipolar 2 and being in deep denial for it for a long time. So I'm just going to get this presentation up, which is not fancy at all. I apologize, but I will be reading out a chapter of my book called Good Will Hunting Your Therapist. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen. Now, Natalie, can everyone see? You don't have to chime in. Natalie, can you see that? Is that coming up? Okay, I hope everyone can see that. Okay, and so we begin. Good Will Hunting Your Therapist. I'm very lucky and privileged to have a therapist. She's a psychiatrist, but I prefer the term therapist as it sounds a little calmer. I don't know. Anyway, I didn't find Liz, which by the way is not her real name. She was fine with me using her real name. I'm just not super comfortable using it. And yes, we have discussed that in session. Anyway, I didn't find Liz in the traditional way. In fact, I've never known how to find a therapist. It's a question I get asked a lot, and I still don't have a good answer. There are a million online resources, and of course, the hellscape that is Yelp, but there's not one holy grail-esque place or site where you can go and find a therapist who is a good fit for you specifically. Therapy should be free and easy to access because, if anything, it's cruel to make a depressed person do admin. And getting a therapist should be as easy as ordering should I don't need online. You should be able to sort by rating, price, race, LGBTQIA plus friendly, gender, add to cart, done. And just like ordering should I don't need online, it should be even easier to do while drunk or high, which is the true test of a great purchase funnel. Now, I didn't find Liz, she found me in a psych ward, which is not an ideal way of finding a therapist. Wouldn't recommend it, but I've been with her ever since. Until then, my only experience with therapy had been with child psychiatrists, and that did not go well. I found them to be condescending, boring, and a waste of my precious time because I was so busy at age 9. Now, a few years later, my feelings on psychiatrists changed because of movies. Movies made psychiatry look cool and dangerous, and people who needed psychiatrists also looked cool and dangerous. But there was one movie, nay, one actor who ruined psychiatrists for me, the brilliant Robin Williams in Good Will Hunting. Now, for those of you who haven't seen it and can't be bothered to Wikipedia right now, Will Hunting has a genius level IQ, but chooses to work as a janitor at MIT. When he solves a difficult graduate level math problem, his talents are discovered by Professor Gerald Lambeau, who decides to help the misguided youth reach his potential. When Will is arrested for attacking a police officer, Professor Lambeau makes a deal to get leniency for him if he will get treatment from therapist Sean Maguire, who played by Robin Williams. Now, Sean Maguire was at once kind of no nonsense and empathetic. He cared about his clients on a level I'd never seen before. He became a father figure to Will, and as much as Will tried to push him away, Maguire wouldn't let him. He stood by Will when everyone else abandoned him. There's one famous scene where they're in session and Maguire tells Will, "It's not your fault." Now, at first, Will is all like, "Nah, you're good." But Maguire pushes on and repeats, "It's not your fault." This goes on for a while, yada, yada, yada. They end up hugging and crying, and it's the most emotional, like, breakthrough you've ever seen. The men are emoting so hard, you can almost feel the trauma leaving Will's body. This is the mental money shot we'd been waiting for. And I remember watching that scene and thinking, if this is what psychiatrists are like, then count me in. Or so I thought. Fast forward 16 years, I'd done my stints in a psych ward and psychiatric hospital. By this point, I'd spoken to many psychiatrists, therapists, nurses, and doctors along the way. I was done being crazy. I was done talking. I was just done. Turns out I was not done, because now, fresh off of a rigorous inpatient care, I'm sitting opposite Liz in her office and I'm mad. I just graduated therapy. Like, why the hell am I here? I don't want to be here. I have friends and other shit to do. I don't have time for this. Liz asks questions. I shrug. I'm exasperated and want to scream. I've been through this a million times. Can you just look at my chart? We sit in silence. For the first time since I walked in, I take a good look at Liz, a tiny white lady in her late 50s, early 60s. She has a stern, dark bob that frames her sweet, doll-like face. Her voice is soft and contains flecks of Minnesotan, but I'm not listening. I'm indignant. Why do I have to speak to this stranger when I'm fixed? Liz breaks the silence with another question. I give some belligerent non-answer because I'm a spoiled, mentally ill brat, and we waited out until that's time. Needless to say, the first session was not a success. In fact, the first 30 weren't successes. It would take nearly a year before I felt any progress or experienced any breakthroughs. All this time, I thought therapy was going to be dramatic, like Good Will Hunting, suspenseful, like Silence of the Lambs, and mildly amusing, like Analyze This. But it was none of those things, although it is a lot funnier than Analyze This. And while I'm glad and super grateful to have a therapist, it took me a while to fully appreciate therapy for what it is. And here are a few things I've learned in the past 7 years. Therapy is hard fucking work. You can't just go to therapy for 3 months and be like, "I'm good now, thank you." Therapy takes time. And in order for it to really work, you have to be consistent with your attendance, which is particularly cruel because the two things, people don't have a lot of these days are time and money. Thankfully, there are more online resources popping up all the time, but it's still not ideal. We should be up to our nose hairs in accessible therapy options. Aside from time and money, there's the searching and the waiting. There are people with insurance who have to wait months to see a therapist. So just imagine what it'd be like for those who don't have insurance. It's fucked, but you already knew that. And me ranting about the broken American healthcare system isn't going to solve anything. But if it does, then please credit me and me alone. Anyway, if you are able to talk to someone on a weekly or monthly basis, stick to it. Show up like it's your job, assuming your job is important to you. The work doesn't get easier, but the more you go, the more tools you'll acquire, and that is what will make the work easier. It's not a case of practice makes perfect, more like practice makes progress. Again, easier said than done. Therapy is bizarre. You sit in a room with a stranger and talk about your feelings? Okay, buddy, now what kind of high concept torture program are we dealing with here? It seems unnatural to talk about yourself for 45 minutes. There's a lot of stopping and starting. You're careful and guarded about what you say because of course you are. This person is a stranger. But after a while, you get into a flow. And one day you notice there's more starting than stopping. You'll find yourself sharing a little more each time. And although what you're sharing may not always feel good in the moment, it will pay off later. I know it's cheesy when people say therapy is an investment in yourself. So I'll say it. Therapy is an investment in yourself. There will be days when you feel like total shit, or you can't be bothered, or you think you're cured. But that's how you got there in the first place. I mean, at least that's how I did. I'd had my fill of therapy and was confident I didn't need any more. But sticking to a rigorous outpatient program was one of the conditions for me checking out of hospital early. Going back to therapy after all the hospitals and like rehab felt like going back to nursery when I just completed my PhD and applied crazy. I saw therapy as kind of a one-size-fits-all I'd grown out of. But you can't grow out of therapy. You can only grow up. There will be days where it feels invigorating and days where it feels frustrating, and no 2 days will ever be the same. But every day at therapy is important because you took the time to work on you. You won't be cured, but little by little, you will heal. It may not feel like that now. It may not feel like that in 3 months, but one day it will. And trust me, that one day is worth the wait. Your therapist won't tell you what to do, and it's infuriating. If therapists won't tell you what choices to make or how to live your life, then what is the point? There have been so many times when I've asked Liz, what should I do? And she comes back with variations on, what do you feel like you should do? And it makes me want to throw all her DSM-5s out the window. It feels like some bullshit deflection or an infuriating game of hide and seek in which your therapist has hidden the answer to your life's problems. It's almost as if they want us to do their jobs for them. And they kind of do. At the risk of sounding like a Pinterest quote, therapists don't give us the answer, they help us get there. And it sucks. I want to be told what to do all the time, not just in therapy, but in all aspects of my life. I want to be told what to eat, how to dress, if I should join that expensive women-only co-working space, even though I can't afford it. When you're someone who feels hopeless and depressed most of the time, you don't want to have to work things out. Not because you're lazy, but because in order to make any decision, you must first complete an obstacle course set in the foggy nightmare forest of your mind. It's exhausting and arduous, and everything is a chore. Living is a chore. Chores become double chores. It's choreception. But you know who isn't exhausted, at least in your mind, they're not? Your therapist. Plus, they've seen it all. If there's one person equipped to tell you what to do, it's them. Then why won't they? To keep us coming back? That's what big therapy wants, comrades. I'm joking. The real answer is not as dramatic as I'd hoped. It's simply all part of the work. It's about giving you space and time to think it through rather than automatically being fed an answer. And the reason I hate it so much is because thinking is scary. Historically, thinking hasn't worked out too well for me. But when I'm forced to think out loud in a safe environment with a mental health professional, it allows me to unknot my unhealthy, tired, and often dangerous thoughts. It can be grueling, but not like doing chores, because I know the work will strengthen my mind, but doing chores will always be bullshit. It trains you to be a little more mentally independent, which is useful because you don't want to become reliant on someone else's opinion for every part of your life. If so, might as well steal their identity and start anew. Is that what you want? To be your therapist? Of course not. You'd have to talk to people like us every day, which, no offense to us, would be my personal hell. If you're in therapy, chances are you've spent most of your life wrapped up in depression, trauma, or some other condition that stopped you from being you. This is a chance to unwrap yourself. And at the risk of sounding like an e-card you received from an eccentric aunt, there's only one person who can answer your questions, and that's you. And if you thought that after all these years I've learned to stop asking Liz to tell me what to do, then thank you for overestimating me. After all these years through the depression, trauma, suicides, she has only once ever told me what to do, and I want to share that wisdom with you right now. don't join the women-only co-working space. And my God, was she right. Therapy is a lot like sex in that you wonder how everyone else does it. I always wonder if I'm doing therapy right. I often find myself thinking about what other people do with their therapists. What about Liz's other patients? How do they do it? Does Liz have more fun with them? Are these the best questions to be asking while I'm in session? Here's a rundown of how my sessions go. I used to sit on a chair. When I got a little more comfortable, years later, I graduated to sitting on the couch. And then Liz invested in a comfier chair, so I went back. Quite the journey, I think you'll agree. Liz will ask me how I am. I'll say like either okay, which is AKA not great, AKA bad, or not good, AKA I'm hanging by a tiny thread. She'll ask me why, and that's how it all starts. I'll talk and she'll listen. Sometimes she'll ask questions. Other times she'll offer her insight and thoughts. All therapists are different. But when it comes down to it, you're having a conversation, which is hard to get wrong. It used to take me a while to get going, even after I got over the whole sharing your darkness with a stranger barrier. I started to doubt whether my issues were worthy enough for therapy. Was my life harrowing enough? And how did it stack up against everyone else's? That's right. I was secretly competing with Liz's other patients for world's worst trauma, which is 100% insane and thus therapy worthy. I don't cry that much in therapy, which worries me because it seems like a common side effect. And if everyone else is doing it, then I want to do it too. Don't get me wrong. I cry a lot in all other situations. The shower, the street, at work, silently in a library, or loudly just outside the library. The world is my crying oyster. I don't know why I'm not a big therapy crier. I suspect it has something to do with the intense one-on-one setup. To me, it feels more natural, acceptable even, to cry in front of a freezer full of steamed chicken soup dumplings at Trader Joe's than it does directly in front of one person. But what I lack in crying, I more than make up for in other behaviors born out of deep trauma. I went through a phase of crawling under Liz's furniture. I would become so overwhelmed by the unpacking of feelings that I'd fall to the floor and roll myself under the coffee table. My body craved small, cave-like spaces in which to unravel. Once there, I'd convulse, scream, and babble incoherently for the rest of the session. Liz would try to coax me out, but for the most part, she'd let me lie there and do what I needed to do. And even though I don't crawl under the table anymore, I do curl up and try to find a small dark space whenever I revisit trauma. Again, I'm not fixed. I'm just not under the table. There is no right way to do therapy. It's what you make of it. Whether it's sitting in silence or bawling your eyes out, it's all about you and what you need. Try not to think about what your therapist thinks. They've seen worse. And try not to think about how other people are doing it. Focus that energy on how other people are doing sex. It doesn't always make you feel better, but it won't make you feel worse either. I assumed I'd leave every session feeling light and free, the same way it feels to unload a heavy backpack or take a huge dump. I imagined I walked out into the sunshine, eyes closed, basking in relief, exactly like Nicole Kidman leaving her lawyer's office after her divorce from Tom Cruise was finalized. To be fair, most of the time I do feel relief upon leaving therapy. I'm a true believer in a problem shared is a problem halved. But don't be shocked if, on occasion, you leave therapy feeling less than Kidman. In the early days, I'm like 7 years in, so it still feels like the early days, but whatever. I came out of sessions feeling confused more than anything. I wasn't used to talking about myself so much. Not true, I'm pretty self-centered. I just wasn't used to talking about my mental state. I had to start from scratch with my mind, which seemed both absurd and impossible, like trying to disassemble Mount Everest. There were times when I'd leave with more questions than answered. I'd get home and feel out of sorts. I'd replay the session in my head in an attempt to understand what I'd said and why I'd said it. I thought therapy was where you could unload and leave your thoughts, like a thought daycare. So why was I leaving with more feelings? What a fucking scam. I was drowning in trauma, both old and new. Looking back, I should have, 1, talked about it with Liz, and 2, given myself time to process those additional feelings. I didn't do either, and as a result, I ended up in hospital for the second time. I was so hell-bent on fixing myself as fast as possible. Instead of taking the time to climb the mountain, I decided to drill right through it. I wanted to give up. I wanted a fast pass through therapy. I was tired of sorting through a pile of shit only to find another one pop up in its place. It was only when I woke up from my second suicide attempt that I realized I couldn't power through my mental illness. I needed to take the time to sit in it, confront it, and get to know it. It's something I continue to battle with and work on every day. I know it hurts, and I know you're tired, but keep going. It'll be worth it. I'll see you on the other side, where there's another mountain. But it's okay. You've got this. There are no breakthroughs. Okay, that's misleading. Okay, many people experience breakthroughs in therapy, but they're not always as melodramatic as movies would have you believe. First of all, I expected to have at least one breakthrough a week, each more profound than the last. I imagined putting my head in my hands, bursting into tears and sobbing and being like, "You're so right, you're so right." And as my self-actualizations gushed forth, I'd reach for tissue after tissue before finally flopping onto a chaise lounge in a satisfied daze of my own progress. I needed my breakthroughs to be deep, insightful, but above all, filled with theatrics. I've experienced movie-worthy breakthroughs only a couple of times, and while they were extravagant and everything I dreamed they would be, my most meaningful discoveries were quiet and reflective. When it eventually dawned on me that I needed to cut certain family members out of my life, there were no tears, no fears, no dropping to my knees and screaming, "Why?" into the sky. I just sat there and took it in, like a majestic sunset or an anal suppository. And despite the lack of mental fireworks, I felt at peace. But I wasn't done yet. It took a few more days to process my thoughts, a few more sessions to crystallize my plan, and a few more months before I could act on it. Breakthroughs come in all shapes and sizes. It doesn't matter how you experience them. The most important thing is how you can learn from them. Therapy can be boring. Sometimes you won't have anything new to say, and that's okay. Therapy doesn't have to be filled with heartbreak or sadness every session. I often considered making up some harrowing shit just so Liz would think I wasn't wasting her time. I know it sounds messed up, but yeah, I don't have an excuse. Truth be told, I've never fabricated anything in therapy. On the days I don't feel like getting into the doom and gloom, I do the opposite. I gossip about celebs, neighbors, because chatting shit feels good, especially when you have that sweet, patient, like doctor confidentiality. And for those who think I'm wasting precious therapy time, let me remind you that one, you're absolutely right. And two, it's not a waste at all. If you're someone who has a mental illness, or even if you don't, but you feel low and a little isolated, anytime you talk, it helps. It doesn't matter what you're talking about. The fact that you're sharing and connecting with another human being is enough. And three, you're right. I absolutely do waste my therapist's time. This is a quick one. It is very hard to make a therapist cry. Trust me, I've tried. It's my holy grail. If you've ever achieved this, I'd love to know how. I must break Liz before I die. And if all else fails, dreams. Therapists fucking love dreams, especially dreams involving family members. They froth at the mouth for those sweet, sweet, super disturbing dreams. The happiest I've ever seen Liz is when I told her I had a dream about my father. One time, she literally rubbed her hands together like a goddamn Disney villain at the thought of me talking about a dream. If you have a dream where you kill or fuck a relative, tell your therapist. It'll make their day. It may even make them cry. And that's it. Sorry if I ran too long.
No, that was perfect. It looks like we have time for a few questions. Is that all right with you, Amanda?
Yes, of course. I was
Okay,
like, I didn't know if I was going too long. I feel so bad.
No, that's perfect. You didn't go over. So for our first question, how do you balance such a fast-paced and busy life while also taking care of your mental health?
I don't think I do. To be honest with you, I struggle with it every day. That's something that I should have prefaced this with. The intro makes me sound very accomplished and that I have a lot of things together, but I actually don't. I don't have a good answer for that, and I don't believe many people do. And if they do, they're lying. I think sometimes, and with everyone's life, especially now, you just keep going. Life kind of like carries you through, and you kind of just have to do it. I have a kid that like, and when you have a kid, you kind of, it's not just you, so you kind of just go for it. Yeah, I feel like I have a lot of bad days, and I try to find pockets of time where I can sit with that and think about that. But yeah, I'm just melting down like everyone else. I melt down the same way as everyone else, one trouser leg at a time, kind of thing. Sorry, that's like a really bad answer. I have to tell you, like, I just don't have it together.
No, that was great. Thank you for sharing. So the next question is, did you have to ask for accommodations at work? Do you have a day-to-day job? And if you do, how did it go?
I have a day job right now, but I'm not like in an office or anything. Like, I mean, none of us are really like in offices with people. I used to have an office job, and I write about this in the book, that it was terrifying to talk about. I don't think I even talked about it at work. I hid it a lot, and I was really scared to go to HR. I didn't trust it. And I think a lot of people share that feeling. I, instead of like asking for mental health days off, I would just lie and said I had like food poisoning, because people, like managers, HR, they're much more likely to be empathetic to food poisoning than they are depression. That's what I found anyway. Like something that like proves that you're really incapacitated, because like people think that like physical stuff is like more like not acceptable, like believable, than like if you were to say like a mental health day. I feel like people just don't believe you. Well, I felt like people just didn't believe me back then. And I think a lot of people feel that way now. Like asking for a mental health day off is like, you know, it's still very scary, and it's so messed up. So yeah, I hid it for like a long time.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's a really common issue, and it definitely needs to be changed. But now that you have gone public with your diagnosis and you're really outspoken about it, do you have any tips on how to do that, or like how did it go for you? Did you face any stigma at all?
Yeah, I faced the same things that a lot of people go through. I think that my motivation was that I felt so alone at the time of my diagnosis, and so terrified, and I was in denial for a long time, which only made it worse. That I got to the point where I just thought I just wouldn't wish this on anyone else. And I know that's what a lot of people go through and have gone through. I'm definitely not the first person to have gone through this. So my drive was like, I was I was more focused on making sure that people didn't feel alone than I was like embarrassed of my mental health. Like once I'd accepted it, I was like, I just want to make sure that like at least one other person doesn't feel like this. That was kind of like my aim. My initial diagnosis, by the way, in the psych ward was borderline personality disorder, which is what I've heard from my experiences is actually quite common for people with bipolar 2, is that they're misdiagnosed initially with borderline personality disorder. I do not know why that is, but it is like a common thing that has come up, that I've seen online, which is weird. But yeah, don't know if that's happened to anyone else, but yeah.
Okay, thank you. For the next question, what is one piece of advice that you would give someone who is trying to balance life, for example, work, children, relationships, etc.?
Oh God. Okay, first of all, thank you. Thank you for all these questions. And like I don't okay, I'm not going to give advice. I'm just going to give you like my personal opinion. And as I said earlier, like I really don't have it together. What really helps me is reaching out like to us, like my support network, which I'm very privileged and lucky to have like a supportive spouse and a group of friends who I can reach out to and be open and honest with, has actually really saved me. In addition to like therapy and medication, I'm talking about like getting through the day. And I rarely like reach out to friends and I'm like, hello, I'm like depressed, or hello, I'm experiencing hypomania. Can we talk? I rarely do that. I'm like, I just want to like chat shit with them. Something that will ground me throughout the day. Something like just checking in with people. And I feel like a lot of people are feeling that right now, obviously with what's going on. But just checking in with people and not isolating really helps get me through a lot during the day. I don't know if that answers any questions. I don't know if I'm actually being useful or not. I'm so sorry if I'm not useful.
No, you
Thank you so much.
definitely are. Yeah, that was great. Thank you. And also thank you for prefacing that, this isn't advice, it's just someone's experience.
Absolutely
So,
not advice.
yeah,
Yes.
so I just need to preface that too. But we're really thankful for you, sharing your tips and your experiences. So thanks. And then our next question, someone wanted to know, how long has your depression episode lasted the longest?
Months. Months, definitely. I think consistently, I would say like 3 to 4 months. Also after I gave birth, I I thought I was going to have postpartum depression. I was like banking on it. Me and my therapist were like, it's going to happen. We know it's going to happen. We're going to be prepared. What actually happened was that I had like a form of high functioning postpartum psychosis for 7 months, like constantly. Um, so my psychosis wasn't like incapacitating that I had to be put in the ward. It was more like like I could still function, but I was still going through a it was a like that was rough. That was a rough 7 months. So that's the longest I've been out for, I would say, but like depression wise, probably like 4 months, 3 to 4 months.
Okay, thank you. And then for the next question, I don't know if you would be able to answer this, so you can let me know, but somebody was asking if you have any tips regarding accommodations or how someone could give notice to their school or their work about an episode. Communicate that properly.
Yeah, I don't know, and I do not want to give advice on that because that is a very important, serious thing. And I would just like, again, just consult. Oh, if that's what people mean by accommodations in the earlier one, that is something that is terribly important. So, and I don't know how to do that. My my situation when I was going through it did not end well. So I am not an expert on that. But I'm so sorry that someone's going through that, and I wish it was easier. I wish I had the answers. I really do. But it would just be incredibly dangerous for me to even rattle off what I thought about that, I feel like.
Yeah. Thank you for explaining that. And just for everyone who's watching, if you do need any help with stuff like that, you can reach out to us. Our contact information is on our website, and we do have a lot of resources and tips for dealing with all different sorts of situations. So definitely check out our website.
Oh my God, do that. Yes, do that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then I just had one last question for you. So I know you talk a lot about how in media and stuff, they don't really represent non-white people with mental illness. And I'm sure that's impacted you and others a lot. So do you have any tips for Asian or non-white people who are dealing with mental illness, but also facing that added layer of stigma?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a big, broad question. And it's also part of the reason why I'm out here with my Asian face doing this, to be like, there are others. We exist. We're here. Do not feel ashamed or guilty of how you feel. And you are not alone. I know this is like really cheesy, but like I was brought up to feel like mental illness was something to be ashamed of. It was an embarrassment, something that you need to cover up, and also something that was made up. And I had wish to God, like someone else who was Asian or brought up in an Asian family had said to me, like, no, this is real. Like, this isn't just like some phase, or this isn't like, made up. Like, this is real. Instead of, like, a lot of it was brushed off. Like, when I was confused as to like why certain family members reacted so negatively to my moods or to my mental illness, other family members would be like, oh, that's just how it is in our family. That's just how it is in our culture. That's just how it is. And I want to tell you, no, that's not how it is. You're going through something serious. Other people have gone through it. You're not alone. And not to feel ashamed or guilty. Like, yeah, sorry, that didn't answer like the movie part, but it kind of just like applies that we are out here. We are here. We exist. And it's not just like, white people who get to be, mentally ill on online on screen, because we all experience mental illness of some sort. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you for touching on that because it's such an important issue. But that looks like it's all of the questions we had today. So I want to thank everyone who joined this webinar and asked your questions. Like I said before, if you need help with anything, don't hesitate to reach out. And I wanted to remind you all that a recording of this will be available on our website. If you want to revisit it, there will also be a link to That's Mental for those who want to read the whole thing. I highly recommend it. It's such a great resource, so definitely check it out. And of course, a big thank you to Amanda for joining us today. Thank you so much for your wonderful presentation and doing a reading of your book. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. I really, I'm so honored to be on here, and thank you to everyone who watched and like asked a question. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you, Amanda. Take care.